What we'll cover tonight on this adult player registration processes webinar, we're going to look at the competition landscape to start with Matt. And then we're going to hand over to Sam, who's going to take us through a club registration and then what an RFU registration type is. And then Sam's going to take us through some of the additional processes that you'll be able to see. I'm going to go back to me and I'm going to share with you some of the resources that will be available to support you and are available now as we move forward to going live with adult player registration. So I'm going to hand over now to Matt, who will take you through the next step. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. And just as Sam moves the slides on there, nice to be on with you all this evening. I'm going to take you just briefly and get a pen and paper, and you can watch this back, as Ian said, at your leisure. It's going to be recorded, but I'm about to give you a little bit of a time window on an existing webinar that we've already got that will go into a lot of the levels and player eligibility throughout those levels. It goes into a lot of detail, and that's a webinar that we did at the end of April. Ian's going to put the link into you all at some point throughout this evening. And if you wanted to watch all of that previous webinar, which goes through all of the different types of registrations, plus a few other bits and bobs, then feel free. But if you wanted to concentrate and specifically drilling down into each of these bandings that you can see on the screen here, then you need to watch between around about 11 minutes and 40 minutes and 30 seconds into that webinar that Ian's going to get the link to you on shortly. But as you can see here, we've got what's called the competitions pyramid. And you can see roughly where two of the registration types, which are the two main registration types, which Sam is going to take you through this evening, where they sit. So where Sam takes you through club registration, and that's the exercise that all players will do. If that's the type of registration that they stay with, and that's as far as they go in their registration journey, and that transaction with and that acceptance with the club registrar, you can see in the bottom half of that pyramid and that staggered black line, that is where those players will be eligible to play. And those players will not be constrained by a transfer deadline. They'll be able to register and play for up to 2 clubs at any one time, and they'll be able to change those clubs and can play for as many clubs as they want to in a season. They'll be able to self-transfer themselves, essentially, with the clubs where the players are registered always remaining a part of that process and receiving notifications should they wish to object in any way whatsoever. When Sam then gets into the RFU registration journeys, you'll see that that is above that black staggered line there. And that is essentially starting to, for want of a better word, lock those players into playing for one club only. And the only time that they'll be able to play for other clubs is some of the processes you'll see this evening, such as students and services pass. And then coming further up again, as we come up through that pyramid, then Sam will also show you some additional steps that club registrars and players will complete together, which will then make them eligible to play at men's level 1 to 4, and indeed if they're contracted as well. So a lot more detail on this on the webinar that Ian's going to get the link to you on. The minutes that you want to look on that specifically, if you want to have a look at the levels that we drill down into, which is at 11 minutes, between 11 minutes and 40 minutes and 30 seconds, 31 to be precise. But this just gives you a little bit of a flavour of some of the registration types we're going to look at this evening and where that player eligibility ties in within that pyramid. But I'll hand you back to Ian or straight to Sam.
Excellent. So we'll move straight to Sam. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Matt. Give me 1 second. I'll get my slides ready. So tonight we will be going through a handful of processes, as Ian has told us. Just get those up. And we start with the very basic account creation. So we're aware that a lot of players will have GMS accounts and some won't. So for those that do, we'll just need to be able to log in and access their GMS account. But for those that are brand new to it, we're starting right from square one. So we will go through that process together. Then we will have a look at that club registration process, which every player from level 1 to the very bottom will need to complete. We will then look at that uplifting process. So what is today effective registration, that higher level of registration called RFU registration, we will then complete. We will then look at some of the more processes that we think will be more often used in the game, so transfers and loans, and we will finish off with student services passes. 100% aware that those aren't all the processes that we can show you, but we've only got an hour. So in the following webinars, we'll be going into more processes like multi-club registration, expedited payments, etc. So we'll get through as much as we can. So tonight starts on the GMS dashboard that I'm sure you all know and love very well. And here we're going to create a new account. So one of the first things that you'll be seeing about GMS and the changes is the updated themes and branding. So England Rugby as a whole is going through a bit of a new design phase. So GMS is trying to make sure it's aligned to that. So you will see some changes as we go through. But please put your questions in the Q&A and we'll make sure to pick those up on the topics as we go through. So I've entered some details here for a new player, Samwise Gamgee, a fictional character, and entered all of those. I'll need to create a password for my account. So just like any other sign up for any other platform, it's very standard password. And then the only other thing that a player will need to do is accept the waivers at the bottom for terms and conditions and GMS. Once a player has entered their details and created an account, they will land on their personal dashboard. So this is what's brand new. For those of you that use GMS all the time, this is the new personal dashboard in GMS. So as soon as you log in, this is the page that you will be presented with. And I appreciate it does look very different to today. This will actually go live ahead of adult player registration to allow you guys to have a go before the registration processes are turned on. You can get used to the new look and feel. And then adult registration to follow after. So this should be coming the next week or so to GMS. So we're on our player's personal dashboard here. And the first thing that a player needs to do is register to play. So for them to be able to do that, they need to add a club that they want to register for. And to do that, on the left-hand side where I've got my organisation, there's an add. So the first big change here, as you can see, I'm clearly in as Samwise here, not a family member, and I need to add an organisation to Samwise. So I've hit add, and on the right-hand side, I've typed in Chichester. So all the clubs in Chichester are present, and I want to add Chichester RFC here. And you can actually already see on the left-hand side, I've added a club, Sale Sharks. So definitely not a player for Sale Sharks or Chichester, but just for example's sake, we'll be using some real clubs tonight. So that's how a player will add an organisation. And once added, the club will appear on the left-hand side as Sale Sharks has there. And then you'll be presented with this register to play. And it's in a couple of places around the screen to make it really obvious. But the big green straight in the middle is register to play. So again, all players will need to tick that button. They are then presented with the club registration form. So this is the form. It's pretty basic. There's not a lot to do here. So we will start by opening up each of those categories of details that we need to know. So the first is playing position. Absolutely, this is not a compulsory field. A lot of players might not even know their position if they're a new player. But if they do know, they're given some options to choose from. Then medical notes. So for each club a player registers for, they will need to declare whether they have any outstanding medical conditions that club should know about. So this is definitely a declaration to each club. Emergency contact is mandatory. So in this example, I've added Frodo Baggins, but it would have to be a specific person and it will check mobile telephone number and email address to make sure they are genuine. But that is a mandatory field. And then lastly, there are some required waivers. So consent to photo distribution, emergency details, and medical distribution within the club, that is. And once that's done, that is the whole club registration form. The rest of the detail below has automatically pulled over from the account. So all the details we put on account creation, like our email address, our telephone number, has automatically added to this form. And then you can see the bottom there, some fake details made up in this example. So once you're happy and you submit, you're returned an email to the email address that you've provided to say thank you for your application to register for this club, and you're also given the prompt internally in this screen, and that's clarification that that registration form has now been submitted to the club for approval. You then land back on your playing personal dashboard, and you can see that register to play has now kind of disappeared from our screen, and instead we've got a pending player status here under my organizations. And there's a few scrolling banner to-dos items that the player can verify their email address, etc. Very obvious on screen how to do that. But that, for the time being, is it for the player. We're next going to move on to the approval process of that step. So, 1 second. Next for us is to have a look at the other side, the club view of this process. So what we have here is the same personal dashboard, but it's not the player anymore. I am now logged in as the registrar for Saleshark. So I've logged in straight away, same screen, but you can obviously see as this account has a lot more on it. But we're trying to make it very obvious about how many applications are outstanding, and ignore the fact this is Salesharks in this example. It could be any single club and it will all be the same for everybody. On the right hand side is where I want to draw your attentions to, which is pending players. So you don't need to navigate anywhere else. It's right there, the amount of applications that are awaiting your approval. Each time an application comes in from a player, you'll also get an email notification to anyone with the role of registrar, so that you'll be notified to make sure that you know there's something outstanding. If we don't click, which we can do, straight into that pending senior men's registrations there, that's where our player is sat, we can also navigate to our waffle at the top left-hand side. And this is the introduction of the new module in GMS. So finally, it's very nice to say that V12 will be turned off. You will no longer see registration V12 coming this summer, and in its place will be player management tool, which you will already have, but it will be much different to what you see today. So if I navigate through player management, just to demonstrate, you will now land on your registration overview dashboard. So this is how a club registrar will manage their entire club's registrations, broken down by the core categories: senior men's, senior women's, and age grade. So our player tonight, Samwise Gamgee, is a senior men's player. So we are expecting to find that player in our pending registration. So each one of these categories we can drill into, we can see the list of players, and we know the ones that we need to action based off their status. If I were to go back to my dashboard and navigate straight through that pending players, it would do exactly the same thing, and it would then bring me into this screen. So this is the drilled in version of that player management pending registrations, or the pending registrations that we saw on that personal dashboard. It brings you to the same view. And these are all my pending registrations that I need to approve or reject. So we can do one at a time, or you can do them all simultaneously by selecting the radio buttons on the left-hand side. But if we choose our example here, Samwise Gamgee, and open him up, that will open up the registration form details on the right-hand side. So everything that the player entered is now presented to the registrar to review. So I can open each one of these category types and see that all that data is correct or not. And I will drill through each one just to make sure I'm very happy with the data that has been input. Some really helpful information here is for club registrations. So in that pyramid that Matt showed us of the different levels, for this level, club registration, these are effective from the day that you submit that registration. So club registration only. So you can see that's auto-populated based on when the registration was put to you. But if you don't approve it, it doesn't become active until it's approved. Also, previous registrations. So in this example, it's a new player. They have no previous registrations. But as a registrar, you'll be keen to see where else this player has played this season or is currently playing. So here you'll be offered your list of all the clubs that player has currently been at or is still at, and you'll see the valid from and valid to dates of each of those registrations. If we're generally happy, then we can select the line as we've done here, and then I'll draw your eye to the top right-hand side where you have two options, either approve registration or reject registration. If we're to approve, then Samwise has dropped from my pending list now, and I will navigate back to my dashboard at the top left, where I can now see that I had 4 pending players, and that's dropped to 3 pending registrations. And Samwise will now have moved into my approved registrations club list. So if I drill into here, you'll be able to see there's Samwise registration. He is now active, no longer pending. And Samwise is good to be allocated to a team 9 and below or 5 and below and be able to play straight away. So that is as simple as approving a club registration. Hopefully that demonstrates that it is a very straightforward process. Any questions that you have, please keep firing those in. We are now going to move on to the uplifting process. So whilst all players will have to complete the process we've just gone through, and that will require a renewal each year, but it's a very straightforward renewal. There's no repeating of inputting of data. It's a single tick box exercise to say, are these details still valid? If so, yes, and it renews. But for those playing levels 1 to 8 in the men's or 1 to 4 in the women's, the club registrar will be required to uplift that registration into an RFU registration. So this process begins in the same screen that we left Samwise in our active club registered players. But now you can see I'm offered a new option when I select his line. Top right-hand side is Submit RFU Registration. So if I press that button, it opens up a very, very similar form to the one that we saw on club registration. But hopefully you can see that actually we've been added on a couple of extra options at the bottom there. So we've now got additional tabs of player nationality and EQP applications, player contract and agent declarations, and identification documents. So I'm just going to demonstrate that to show you that all of this data has pre-populated based off the club registration. So there's no need to re-enter the same details again. GMS is now storing it and managing it for you. So you never have to repeat this exercise as long as the player's data is up to date. And there you can see that line of the new, where the differentiation between club and RFU registration forms are. So I'm going to show you a couple of these, but the thing to be really mindful of is this data is variable depending on the level of your first team in your club. So a level 1 team, like Sail Sharks in this example, is going to have one of the largest data captures because it's necessary for the level they're playing. But as we work down that 1 to 8 or 1 to 4, the level of data capture reduces, just trying to make sure that the lower levels we don't need all this data for, we're not asking for or capturing. So what we see tonight, the form might not be identical to what you have at your specific club, but it's good to see the full version so you can understand what we're doing throughout the game. So a couple of options here. I'll start working through this form. So nationality and EQP, they're all pre-selectable options. They're not free text. So England here, my player code, British passport, category, then EQP application and international eligibility. So again, this is the full breadth, but for lower down levels, you won't necessarily need to fill out any of this information. Then we move to contract and agent. So we're aware that a lot of players will be amateur, a lot of players won't have agents. So the default is actually amateur player and agent. So if your players are just amateur, just agent, you don't even need to open this section. If they are contracted, however, then you'll come in and select contract. And again, like we did on the other forms, they're pre-selectable options and you will choose the right one for your players. If you do select an agent, then the agent will need to approve the registration, and we'll come back to that in a second. But the agents, again, are only pre-selectable. It's not a free text. So the agent will have to be declared as such in GMS. Then lastly is identification documents. So for those applying for specific passes like student or services passes or EQP, then we will require some form of identification to make sure that that is correct. So for this player in this instance, there's actually nothing that we need to upload. Although I've gone for EQP, this is very much just for demo purposes. But at the moment, I've got nothing attached to this player. If I had, then those icons that you can see will turn a nice big green, and you'll be able to see core details about those attachments as the administrator. If I am then happy with my RFU registration form, so that's it, there's nothing else to it. It's quite straightforward and is like for like with the DocuSign form that currently exists. I can either do one of two things. If I don't have all the information because the player has not given it to me and I need to ask more questions, I can simply save this form And what that will do is save all of the detail that you filled out, and then allow you to come back to it and complete it at a later date. So we're going to do that first. So I've pressed saved. I've not sent my submission, so Samwise is still there in my active club registered list. And now if I were to go back to submit RFU registration, you can see that all that detail is still there, saved as it should be. Now, if I'm happy, I will submit my RFU registration form. And this is where it's really important to understand the different levels and the different approval processes. So in this example, I've actually got rid of the agent, and because it's a level 1 club, a couple of things will need to happen. First of all, the player will need to approve an RFU registration form. So all of that detail we've captured about them, a player will need to approve that, but only if they are level 1 to 4 men's or level 1 women's, or contracted below that level. So if they're 5 to 8 contracted in men's or 2 to 4 contracted, they will again need to approve their contract. However, if they're not contracted at those slightly lower levels, 5 to 8 and 2 to 4, then the player does not need to sign off on the RFU registration. So in this example, that's what's going to happen. So you can see now I've submitted it and the line for Samwise has dropped from this list of players. So I'm going to return to my registration overview. And now what you can see is lower down in the screen, those different statuses under RFU registered. So because we've submitted an application, our player status has changed from being club registered and active, and now he is sat in the form type awaiting player approval. So it actually works bottom to top under RFU registered. So if an agent was required, they would sign it off. If not, it skips the agent approval and moves to the player. And if it doesn't require player, it skips player and moves to awaiting RFU approval. So this player, Samwise, because he's contracted and at level 1, he will require approval. What I've done then is drill into that awaiting player approval line. And here we can see a different player, but it's just to demonstrate where expediting comes into this process. So I've submitted my RFU registration, and as soon as I press submit, that qualifies me to expedite a registration. So I can expedite it in any of those statuses, agent, player, or RFU, or pending. And by drilling in and selecting the player, I receive expedite registration at the top. So this is a different player to the one we're looking at, but it's just to demonstrate what this will look like. So if I press that expedite, I am now taken straight to a payment gateway in GMS. So now, as long as you have the permissions of a registrar, then you will be able to complete expedited payment along the process. You don't have to wait for one person who might have the ability to do that in GMS. Now you can do it as part of the process. So hopefully this offers clubs greater flexibility to be able to expedite, and makes it an easier process to complete by having the payment gateway right here. So now we navigate back to the fact that Samwise is awaiting player approval. So I'm now going to log in back as Samwise to show you what that looks like. So here we are back on Samwise's player management dashboard. And Samwise will have received an email to say there's a contract that he needs to sign off on. And I'll draw your attention to the bottom right-hand side, back in notifications. We're going to get very used to this pane down there in notifications. And we can see we've got contract approval 1. So by drilling straight in and clicking contract approval, that opens up the RFU registration form that we have just seen the registrar fill out. And the player can open up all of the categories as we did for everybody else and review the same information. Importantly to note, though, is here in this example of nationality and EQP, the player cannot change anything. All they're doing is approving the information that's been submitted. They cannot edit any details. They cannot make any changes after your submission. So they can only review and approve or reject. So we're going to approve. And we can now see that the bottom right-hand side, that notification has disappeared. So you'll only ever see a notification if there's something for you to do. In this example, the player has done it, notification is gone, and that's good. Now, before I move on to screen, think back to that player management dashboard where we had the different statuses of awaiting agent, awaiting player, awaiting RFU registrar. Now, because the player has approved, it's moved along the approval process to the RFU registrar for approval. So I'm now going to log in as the RFU registrar to show you how they will approve. As you can see, the screen is almost identical into the player management, the player's personal dashboard, RFU registrar's dashboard, sorry. And again, I will draw your attention to the bottom right-hand side in their notifications pane. So demonstrates that this is very similar for everybody in the process. And again, just like the player, you will be able to see a approval. The registrars have a lot more notifications than anybody else because they have a lot to do. So theirs is broken down by different levels and types. So this player, Samwise, playing for a level 1 club, will be sat in the level 1 to 4 RFU registration male category. So if I drill straight into there, we'll be able to see our player Samwise just as the other views did. I can then, in the same way, open that registration form as an RFU registrar. And you can actually see that here, an RFU registrar has the privileges of being able to update information. But they are presented the same information to approve or reject. Here, once we open our player identification document section, we know that this player has not attached anything. But what we offer the ability is that attachments can be uploaded. And here's a differentiation to see that in this case, we've actually attached a passport to this player. So if they're going for EQP, required a passport as proof, then this one we can see is attached, but unfortunately it's expired. So this is a good note to the registrar to say I can either approve or reject based on this information, but that's just how that demonstrates for an RFU registrar. Lastly, something that's really important to note is for an administrator who's applying for a registration form will see this section. So you'll be able to view this information about the player, but you will not be able to edit it. Only an RFU registrar will be able to edit this information. And this tells you some really important things. Essentially, when is this registration effective from? So we saw that our club registration was effective from immediately, which is true. But because we've uplifted this player to an RFU registration, because it's his first registration, it's effective from 1 day, 24 hours. So the effective registration has defaulted to tomorrow in this example. Then we've got some other important information. So effective to, if there's an end date to the registration, maybe it's on a dual registration or a loan, etc. And then we've got whether the player is marked as academy, whether they qualify for EAP or women's dual reg, whether they're England qualified, or whether they're eligible to play for their first team. So just some important information to understand. So for this demo, I'm going to update the effective from to today's date, and I'm going to update the England qualified to yes. Once approved, you can see that notification has disappeared for our RFU registrar, as it did for the player. We have now navigated back to being the Sales Shark registrar. So I'm back on that same view we saw earlier. And now we can see that player has moved into pending registration because it will remain in pending until the effective from date or valid from date is reached. As soon as that happens, the player will become approved. So now, because I, as the RFU registrar, have updated the effective from to today's date, we now see Samwise Gamgee in an RFU registered active status, valid from today, as I updated it as the RFU registrar. And as soon as that happens and the player is active, they are good to go and play. That's 1 to 8 and 1 to 4, as previously said. And that's it for RFU registration form. So hopefully that demonstrates it's quite a straightforward process. It will definitely take some getting used to, but once you've done one, it's very much one of those processes that you'll completely understand and fly through the remaining, however many you have. I'm going to move on because we've still got quite a lot to get through. So I'm going to work now through transfers, which is a relatively new concept, but this is effectively the movement of players in levels 1 to 8 men's and 1 to 4 women's. And once a player is RFU registered, They cannot deregister themselves. They cannot just move clubs without authority from their current club. So the transfers process allows for an official approval route with sign-off for the current club, an application by an applicant club to move that player into the new club. So this process will begin as the applicant club. All processes that you have to complete, such as transfers, loans, student services passes, are always initiated by an applicant club. So here in this example, whilst we know our player is at Sale Sharks, we have logged in as Dudley Kings Winford, who will be requesting a transfer of this player. So just like we did in Sale Sharks, we're going to navigate back to our player management tool. And this is where all those other options that you might have spotted on the left-hand side are used to begin processes. So again, only applicant processes on the left-hand side. So if I navigate into transfers, I can see for Dudley, I've got no active transfers here, but if you did, this is where they would present. And to request a new transfer, on the right-hand side, I've got request transfer. I'm then presented with a search functionality, a first name, last name, and date of birth. So you must have this information about the player to be able to return the player. But if I type in our Samwise Gamgee, I am then returned with the player tile, which tells me this is the right player. If there's somebody with a common name and there are multiple people born from the same day with the same name, then we can differentiate them on the return by their RFU ID or the club that they're currently at. So a bit of extra information is presented back to show you that it's the right player. If you're happy that's the right player, there's a nice tick box on the right-hand side. And by simply ticking that box, I have now created a transfer application to Sale Sharks for this player. So I, as the applicant club, get a notification to say you have successfully applied for this player. And we can see now that the player line has been added to our club in transfers, but with some really important information to outline here. They are only pending. So just because you have applied for this player, it does not mean they can play for you. And like we saw in our RFU registration, the effective from date is 7 days from the submission of the transfer. So not 7 days from the RFU registrar approving it, but 7 days from the submission of that transfer. So you can see it's pre-populated to 7 days time. I will then log in as the home club of this player, or the current club, Sale Sharks. So Samwise is currently at Sale Sharks. And just like we saw on the approvals of the other processes, if we navigate down to the right-hand side of this personal dashboard registrar, we can see now that we've got a new notification for a transfer request mail. So if I drill into that, I can see there's my application from Dudley, the Samwise, and I can open that application and it gives me some information about this player. So it shows me where the transfer is from and to, so Sale Sharks to Dudley, and it also gives me information about those clubs. So what league level are the clubs both at? What form of registration does that player or will that player currently have? And that is hopefully enough information for me to either understand whether I can approve this transfer request or not. But if I'm happy, then I, as the current club for the player, will press approve. A very important thing to note, though, is we need to keep on top of transfers, and there will be email notification each time there's a request. But the transfer will automatically occur after a 7-day waiting period to allow for registrars who are away on holiday, etc. So you need to make sure that you've always got someone with a registrar permission set in GMS to make sure you can manage your transfers well. Obviously, anything can be reversed if it's wrong, and RFU registrars have the ability to complete all processes should that be the case. So in this example, I can approve or reject the transfer, but I'm going to approve. And now we can see that notification has gone, just like it has for the other examples. And now I'm back in as my applicant club, Dudley, back to player management, back to my transfers, and now you can see an updated information about this player. And there's some really important things to understand about how this player has come into the club. So first of all, we can see their status is updated from pending to active. And that is because as soon as a transfer is approved by the current club, that player will enter your club as club registered active already. So there's no need for that player to complete club registration form. They will be automatically entered to that club as an active club registration. That therefore, their valid from date has updated to today's date based on their club registration. So they are able to play for a maximum of a level 9 team or a level 5 women's team because of their club registration. However, should we want to uplift this club registration to an RFU registration, now that Samwise is my player at Dudley, if I did that, the club registered date on the right-hand side, that's the date that the registration for an RFU registration would become active from. So even if I upgraded this player to an RFU registration, whilst they're active at this level, they would not become active at RFU registration level until 7 days, unless they expedite. So if I know this player wants to play up, so Dudley's first team's at level 4, then I can select Samwise, and just like we did in the previous demonstration, I can submit their RFU registration straight from here. And again, it's the same form that presents. So hopefully you'll see that how repetitive this can be and hopefully how easy it will be to learn. And Dudley is a really good example because it's a level 4 club. So here we can see the different information that we're requiring compared to Sail Sharks. Sail Sharks under nationality and EQP had lots of information capture, but for Dudley, it's a lot less of a requirement. So they're only presented with what they need to fill out. We've marked this player as contracted, and the only key difference to note is anyone below level 1 men's needs to fill out the contract information, so about payment terms, contract dates, etc., bonuses. So this information is required when submitting RFU registration for a contracted player not at level 1 men's. And again, no agent involved in this process. And then lastly, this is a really important part. So you can see that we uploaded an attachment for this player when they were at Sail Sharks, but now they're at Dudley, that those attachments have followed the player wherever they go. So you as a registrar don't have to re-upload passports, re-upload visas. Once a player has uploaded it once, it will follow them throughout their playing career, unless they upload a newer version, etc. But we can see here for Dudley, it's a great win because the attachments are already there for the player. Unfortunately, this one has expired, but hopefully a good benefit. So I will submit my RFU registration post-transfer, and just like it did in our RFU registration transfer world, it'll then go to the player first of all, because this is a level 4 men's club. 1 to 4 men's and 1 women's always require player approval. So player will come back, open their contract information, approve, review the information, and then just like we did on the RFU registration for a non-transferred player, the process repeats for RFU registrars, where back to 1 to 4 men's and another approval from the RFU registrar that this registration is acceptable. Now we can see the benefit of previous registrations for this player. So Samwise was previously registered at Sail Sharks, and then we can see his new registration at Dudley. And we can see how the valid from and to has updated with the process. So we can see as a registrar that for Sail Sharks, that registration terminated here and began here for Dudley. And over time, as this player moves around, it will be a richer experience to understand where that player has moved from and to, and whether we can approve or reject registrations. So we'll approve this registration. And again, we see the key information here, and it's defaulted to 7 days time because it's a transferred player, but it's 7 days from the application of the transfer, not 7 days from application of an RFU registration. So whilst in this example it was the same day, it's a very important date to note. But for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to manually override that as an RFU registrar to today's date, and then I will approve the registration. And then once again, the notification has disappeared for me. So I'm back now as Dudley's registrar. And if I navigate back to the tool you'll soon know and love, player management, much as I do, we'll be able to now drill into transfers and see that updated status now. So Samwise now has an active RFU registration as of today because we overwrote it. and that player is now good to play 1 to 8 men's and 1 to 4 women's. So that's transfers in a nutshell. We've got 2 more processes to get through, so I'm going to get through these as quickly as I can, but the next is loans. So in this example, we're going to use Northern. So Northern are the applicant club, always starts with the applicant club, and we navigate to our player management tool, and we're now into loaned in. So this is where I will make requests to loan in a player. So very simple, similar to transfers, and hopefully that you'll see all of these processes are very similar to try and make them as easy as possible. So I'll request new loan, and it's the same search functionality, and we're going to start using a different player now for our loan. So in this example, we're going to start using our Frodo Baggins. So I've searched the player in exactly the same way as I did for transfers. I've returned my player card, and here we get some extra information or an extra step that we need to complete for this loan application. So as an applicant club, I need to declare when I want this player from and when I want them to. And it will also show you the levels. And it's really important because there are regulations about what levels of clubs can loan up and down to. So we're presenting that information to everybody so everyone is aware what this application or the likelihood of this being approved or not. So I will put in my valid from, and I can request a valid from loan from today's date. However, the default of that being accepted is 7 days, so they would only become valid from 7 days because our loans can be expedited. But whilst I can require a valid from today's date, the effective from would only be in 7 days' time. So I'm going to put some fake information in there about a loan and submit that application. And now we can see, just like transfers, we've created the line for a new loan, and it's awaiting club approval. So just as we did for transfers, we are now logged in as the home club for this player. Harlequins is the home club for Frodo Baggins, naturally. So just like in the other examples, we navigate to the right-hand side into notifications, and now we see a new notification for loan approval, male level 5 to 8. So it's always the applicant club level that will appear. So obviously Harlequins at 1, but because Northern are 6, then they're appearing in this category. I then drill into the loan request, and hopefully you're starting to see how repetitive it is for all these processes. I can then drill into that loan request, see all the required information, and I can either accept or reject as the home club of this player for this loan. If I'm happy with the detail, I will approve the loan. And then all loans must be approved by an RFU registrar. So in this example, I'm logged back in as an RFU registrar, back down to my notifications, and there we go. It's another notification of loan approval for an RFU registrar to approve. Open up the information. The same information is presented. So hopefully you see that it's very similar for everyone in the process. And I can override the valid from date as an RFU registrar should I wish. So for this demonstrative purposes, I will. But you saw the default is 7 days on a valid from for an RFU registration loan. If I'm now happy as the RFU registrar, I will approve this. And now I'm logged back in as Northern's registrar. So we're going to have a look at what this has done to our player. So here he is, Frodo Baggins, and we can see that the valid from is 7 days. So this player cannot play until those 7 days have passed. However, I have 2 options available to me. Now I have approval from the current club and the RFU registrar, and that is to either expedite the loan, which we won't go through tonight, but it's a very similar process to what we saw in RFU registration. If I click that button, I'm given the payment gateway and it sends off an approval for an expedited loan to bring that date to the 10th, or I request an extension on the loan should I wish to keep that player longer down a separate approval route, but we won't go through those tonight. Hopefully that shows you how simple loans is. Quite straightforward, which is good news, I think. And now we're going to move on to our last process of the night for student services passes. However, again, these aren't all the processes available. We will continue to work through the processes in the coming webinars, so please make sure to come back and have a look at the other processes available to you. So in this example, we are logged in as the player now. So student services passes is a little bit unique to the other processes because the process is triggered by the player. So I'm Frodo Baggins. You can now see my other registrations here. So I'm predominantly at Quins, and I need to add an attachment to my player profile. So we saw that in the RFU registration when an attachment was there pre-populated, but this is how a player will actually attach those attachments. And in this example, we're going to go through student services pass. So we need to find the specific attachments to do. So there are some pre-populated on the screen here, but for a new attachment, I draw your eye to the top right-hand side. So I can select new. Then I have some file types I can choose from. So I've got both my student and services types. If you are applying for a student or services pass, then you do need to upload front and back as a player. And again, we are logged in as the player here. So I've just used any old image to demonstrate this. And once those are attached, they are presented in this view to the player to show you that you have attached. Here in this example, this player is holding both their student ID and their services ID front and back. Once that's done by the player, that allows other clubs to apply for student services passes now for that player. If that player does not have the right attachments, then you will not be able to apply for a student or services pass for that player. So if a player comes to you to say, I'd like to come and play for you on a services pass, you need to remind them that they must attach their identification documents for you to be able to initiate that process. So we are back in player management. We are in our registration overview for Whittington in this example, and we're going to request a services pass for Frodo Baggins. So just like in transfers and loans, we request a services pass top right-hand side. It's the same search for the player, and there's our Frodo Baggins. So we select the player, and just like loans, I've now created the line awaiting club approval. So as you can probably predict by now, I'm now logged back in as the home club for this player, Harlequins. Bottom right-hand side, notifications, open up my service pass approval mail notification, and then I'm presented with the application here. I'm then offered information about this service pass request as the home club. So I can see the attachments. So here you can see we've got some green attachments that are in date, haven't expired. And I can download those if I wish as the home club to make sure that I think they're okay. And then we can also see the level again of the applicant club. So here, level 10 club requesting a services pass for the Harlequins player. If I'm happy, then I can approve or reject. So I will approve this registration. And just like loans, all student services passes must be approved by an RFU registrar. So back down to our right-hand side of an RFU registrar, service pass approval, select the line, the same information presented, approval. What I want to demonstrate here, though, is that student services passes is a dual club registration for levels 1 to 8 men's and 1 to 4 women's. So for Harlequins, this player is still being presented as an RFU registered player for Harlequins. So you can still see Frodo still there in the line where he should be. So still qualifies to play for Quins completely. And now we can see at the same time, if we log back into Whittington and their player registration overview, Frodo is again there holding a registration. In this example, Whittington being a level 10 club only need to club register players. So they're only being presented club registered. Therefore, they don't need to upload this registration to an RFU registration, but Frodo is holding a registration at both clubs. Then lastly, before I hand over to Ian, I thank you all for giving me the time to take you through these processes and hopefully alleviate some stress around they should be a lot easier for you. Here we have that player view. So at the end of that student services pass process, we can see Frodo has got holding multiple registrations at Harlequins and Whittington there with a player registration at both. That is the end of my segment. So thank you again for all of your time. Ian's just going to do a final part now for you.
Excellent, Sam, and really for a detail there. Remember, this is recorded, so you will be able to go back and look at that player registration process that Sam went through and have a look. And when we go live, you will see that there is a lot of resource to support you. So ongoing communications are going out to the game. And you'll see, you'll have seen over the last few months, the big focus is around getting ready for adult player registration and ensuring that players can log into GMS, existing players targeting at the moment. So existing players will have a GMS account. They need to ensure that they know that. So you guys need to help them with that. They need to be able to log in. So you need to check that they have the correct email address associated to their account, and they need to verify that email address. By verifying the email address, that allows us to be able to help with prompting communications to the players so that they can register to play when the time comes. But you'll see a large amount of that information is available to view in Community Rugby Help. So if you haven't discovered Community Rugby Help yet, there is an adult player registration tile on the front page, and all the information that you need to know around adult player registration at this point in time can be found within that tile. If you are having any issues specifically around anything around adult player registration, you can submit a help request and one of the team will get back to you. Currently, that could be where you're finding duplicate accounts when you're looking at which players are verified and not verified. If a player has a duplicate record, it may say their email is already in existence, but you can't find where that is because maybe that player has done a coaching course or been part of another club and have got another email address associated to them. So in order to stop that duplication and to remove that, you will need to submit a help request to Community Rugby Help. They're there to help you and support you, and the turnaround time is very quick at the moment. So really do use that if you're stuck. We also will have, going forward, some how-to video guides that will be available via our platform for Rugby YouTube. We do have an adult player registration playlist. So if you head over there now and make sure you subscribe, you'll be able to see some of the webinars that have taken place earlier this year, specifically, especially that one around levels that Matt was talking about earlier in the session. Do check that out if you're stuck and wondering around levels that your club play, etc. Those videos will be embedded into the articles on Community Rugby Help, so it's a one-stop shop to help you visually and listen audio. And we appreciate everyone learns and views in different ways. There will be a how-to video for players, so you can ping that to players via the various different methods that you use to communicate, WhatsApp, Bonds, all the different groups, etc. So it's nice and easy for players just to log on, look what they need to do on the video and actually go and do it. Currently, we have my GMS support trainer team. There are 6 across the country. They deliver sessions primarily online. And the big focus at the moment is around, there is a data session specifically available that can support clubs with what you need to do now around email verification and getting ready, making sure your data's in a good place so that players can log in and register to play. Going forward, we will have an adult player registration session to support clubs depending on what level that you play, and our GMS support trainer will be able to take you through and guide you through some of the processes within that. So really exciting, that's coming up. And we've had a real dedicated effort over the last few months to support the game with ensuring they know where this information is, specifically around adult player registration and what they need to do, what you guys need to do to get ready, especially around ensuring that existing players who already have a GMS account can log into GMS and that they have a verified email address. So we've really focused on that. That's ongoing at the moment and will be as we move through to the summer and our go live date, and we will look at that in the future. And of course, we have had our platform for rugby user groups where we have had ongoing user feedback and testing all the way through this process of building the platform. It's been fantastic to get game feedback from different people with different roles within the game. And it was also brilliant to actually test what a player needs to do with our players across the country, where we visited clubs from all the way up in Matt's neck of the woods in Newcastle, all the way down to the south and everywhere in between. So at various levels across the game. So that was really exciting, and we have actually been able to implement some of those changes that players were suggesting to make it easier. So that's really exciting. I know I saw a couple of questions earlier just around mobile. It is mobile optimized for players. It's really easy to do on a mobile. Of course, most players will be registering via a mobile. So hence why we have done all that testing around that area. And you're part of the webinar program. You're on this. This was brilliant. There are upcoming webinars coming up on the 17th of June. So the 17th of June will be specifically for players. So if you've got any players that want to understand the process, or you guys want to maybe understand what a player needs to do again, we're going to run that session and show what a player needs to do to register to play. Big key point to remember though, for all this to happen, a player needs to be able to log into GMS. So they need an up-to-date verified email address on their GMS account. So main thing that club you guys can do to get ready is ensure that your players know that they have a GMS account. You'll be able to see that if you log in as an administrator, and also that they know that their the email address that is associated to their account, and that they have logged into that account and verify. If a player does those things and logs in, verifies their email address, come when we go live, they'll be able to log in and simply register to play. Now's the time to find those duplicates. You will find this in your clubs where players, as I mentioned earlier, may have done a coaching course at another club, or they may have been involved at another club. So it may come up that they have their email address is already existing. If that's the case, you need to go on to Community Rugby Help, submit a help request, and you will be assisted, and that will be resolved. So excellent work there. That's the big thing to do ahead as we move forward. So keep work. I know it's a challenge sometimes to get through that, but we've seen some good progress from clubs along the way. So keep going. That brings us to a close to our session this evening. As I said, we've got future webinars coming up. This session will be repeated on the 24th and the 25th of June. 24th is in the evening, 25th is at lunchtime. This session will be available on Platform for Rugby. Big thank you to Sam, Matt, and Ollie Norris for supporting this evening. We hope you all have a good rest of the evening, and thanks for attending this session to understand player registration processes.